Hi, my name is Jordan, and in 2024, I became a part-time eBay reseller. I listed and sold my first item at the end of February 2024, and now that we are coming up on the end of February 2025, I thought it would be a good time for me to share a little bit of my experience and specifically the tips that I learned in that first year, just starting off, but then also things that I learned throughout the year to help you in your journey into eBay reselling. And so, with that said, let's get into tip number one. My first tip is that you really need to understand and focus on the sell through rate of items that you're trying to sell. Uh, like, for instance, let's say I have this Panasonic telephone base main phone that I'm trying to sell. I could look it up by this model number, KXTG5621S, or I could use my app and just scan the UPC barcode on this. What that's going to do, it's going to bring me up all of the listings that are currently active on the site, uh, listings that people are trying to sell this item. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that there are 50 of these exact items that are being sold on the site. And then you have to go over to your drop down menu and search by sold listings. And that's going to bring you up how many of this exact item have sold in the past 90 days. So let's say, for the sake of argument, there's 50 listed and 25 have sold in the past 90 days. That means that of the ones listed, about 50% of them will sell every 90 days. 25 divided by 50, 0.5, 50%. So if I listed this competitively, like at the medium level, the median level on eBay, I would expect this item to sell in about 180 days or less, sometimes more, or I could price it more competitively, try to get it out the door earlier. Uh, so I don't have like a rule of thumb of like what's the lowest sell-through rate item that I will buy. Some people say only buy sell-through rate items that are 80% or more. I would say 75% of the items that I buy are um, around that 50% sell-through rate, or maybe even less, maybe 35 to 65% sell-through rate. Because I have room for storage, especially if they're smaller items that I can list and I can set on a shelf somewhere. I can put them away. But I also like to list things competitively priced. So even if it has a 35% sell-through rate, I'm not too worried about that. I look at what they're selling for and what they're currently listed at now, and I'll list them at the bottom end of that to try to get it out the door a little faster. Tip number two is to set up a calculated USPS ground shipping policy. This is how I ship the vast majority of my items. Some people will say begin shipping with priority mail envelopes, priority mail boxes. I don't like to do that because that raises up your shipping costs. Calculated ground, what that's going to do, you're gonna put in the dimensions when you list your item. So like, let's say this was the box I was shipping. I would measure this, measure this, measure this, length by width by height, punch that in. I would measure and estimate how big, how much weight there is for this package, and put that in as well. And then I don't have to worry about shipping costs because eBay is going to calculate the shipping for me based on where that person is in the country. I live in Minnesota, so if somebody buys of the package in Minnesota, it's going to be a lot cheaper than if somebody buys it in Los Angeles. Uh, that's the way I would begin shipping all of my uh, packages on eBay. That's what I did to begin, and I would still do it again if I was starting over. Tip number three is a simple one. You only want to sell similar for your items. You don't want to be putting in all of the specifications for each item that you list. You don't want to do that manually. That would take up so much time. What you want to do is you want to sell similar. You want to, again, I'll use this for example. If I sell this item, or if I'm looking to sell this item, I would look up this UPC, see how many are listed. I would go to the sold items, and then I would click on one of the higher priced, professionally looking items that have already sold, and I would make sure that I'm selling the exact same thing. Sometimes my components, maybe this is missing something that they're box has in it. So it's a good opportunity to make sure that you have everything. But you would want to then, after you confirm that you're selling the exact same thing, you would want to choose the sell similar option. And that's going to fill out all of your specifications. For this, it would be like number of headsets, brand, model number. That should already be in there. You can do a quick double check of those things, but generally speaking, it's pretty accurate. Number 4, this is another simple one that I learned before I even started on eBay. You want to promote every listing. So promoted listings are eBay's way of putting your listings at kind of the top of the pile. You can pay eBay a certain percentage of your final sales price to give your listing priority over other listings that maybe don't have the promoted listing. I set all of my listings anywhere between 2% and 5%. If I look at my numbers, I have about 58% of my listings are sold through promoted listings, which means I would reduce my number of sales that I have by 58% if I just didn't promote any of my listings. That's a big deal when you're trying to move inventory. And when we're talking about 2% or 3% of a final sale price, would I rather hold on to this telephone for potentially half a year longer just to make 2% more on it? Let's say I sell it for $20. Am I really willing to hold on to this, to have it take up shelf space for 6 more months just to gain another 40 cents on it? That doesn't really work for me. Perhaps it works for you if you have a warehouse, but it just doesn't make sense in general. So promote all of your listings. You can start at 2%, or you can go up as high as 7 or 8% if you want to keep things moving quickly. But I don't think there's so much of a difference between those 2 to 7%. All right, tip number 5. Now we're getting into the tips that I really did learn along the way. And the first tip for this part of the video, tip number 5, is to stay curious. Reselling can be fun at times, and it can also be very cumbersome and repetitive, sometimes disheartening when you don't find things. Some people walk into thrift stores with a negative mindset of this store always has the highest prices and they're absurd. And do you see this clothing tag that's $13? It was sold in store for $25 and they're going to sell it for $13 here. That might be true, but if those are the things you focus on, all you're going to see are the outrageous prices, and you're probably going to have a bad experience and end up leaving early. Rather, every time you go to the thrift store, you should think, there is something in here that is worth $50, $60, $80 of profit for me. And it's my job to find the most lucrative item in this store I can as a reseller. And so I make that, I'm an everything seller, so I make one pass through the store and I'm looking for things that I have learned that are valuable. And I do a quick pass over everything, electronics, clothes, home goods. And if I don't find anything that's extremely valuable, I will go back around and say, okay, what can I profit on? Maybe if it's not $50, maybe it's not $60, but is there something I can buy for $8 and profit $12 on, right? That would be something like a $32 sale price or a $30 sale price. You want to stay curious, you want to stay motivated, and you want to always anticipate that there is something for you to profit on in this store. And oftentimes there's many things for you to profit on, but you have to have the right mindset. Tip number 6 is to not focus on the size of your packages that you're going to ship. Maybe this sounds contradictory to my previous calculated ground shipping tip. What I mean by that is I remember early on in shipping that I would try to make boxes as small as I could. I would try to, like I'm shipping a shirt, and I would ball it up nice and tight, and I would try to put in the exact dimensions of like 3.5 inches by 6.5 inches by oh, this is between 7 and 7.5. Can I get it down to 7 inches? It really doesn't make a difference in ground shipping. Ground shipping is for really smaller items. The biggest difference isn't the size of the box, but it's about ounces. And so 6 ounce, something to ship that's 6 ounces or less is going to be a lot different than things that are 14 ounces or less. And then when you get up to things that are over a pound, there's not much difference between something that's 1 pound 2 ounces, 1 pound 15 ounces. If the box is anywhere from this size to this size, maybe a little smaller, doesn't really matter. Like, the only time that I'd be really concerned about the size of a box that I'm going to be selling is how is this item like heavier than 15 pounds, 20 pounds, or is this something that's really long, like it's 25 inches? At that time, my estimations that I enter in before I list something, I'd want to be closer than if I'm selling a t-shirt or a telephone part or even something like a big casserole pan. I'm just going to estimate. This is a 13 by 9. How big is the box going to be? I don't know. It's going to be 18 inches by 8 inches by 13 inches. Put that in. How heavy is this? I don't know. It feels like it's about 3 pounds. I'm just going to put in 6 pounds. If it ends up being 7 pounds, 8 pounds, I'll eat the extra cost, the extra dollar. If it ends up being less than that, I still get money into my bank account. So not too concerned. Don't fret about how much the final package is going to be in size and weight. Tip number 7 is to inventory by category type, not by date or like alphabetical by bins. You can kind of actually see some evidence of my previous inventory sorting system back here. You see this A bin. I also have like a queue over here. What I would do when I first started doing inventory is I would buy a whole bunch of things, and then I would find a bin to put them in. I'd make a note of it, and then I'd put it all into a spreadsheet. I would take my listing from eBay, copy it into a spreadsheet, and say this item is in bin A or B or C. This was really cumbersome. It really added a lot of time to the listing process, where now I just put them where they should go based on category. So I have a bin for kitchen parts, for blenders and crock pots and things like that. I have a bin for Nike shoes. I have a bin for New Balance shoes. I have a bin for vintage toys, stuff like that. So is there a little bit more risk with this of not being able to find an item when it sells? Perhaps, but I just find that it saves so much time in the listing process and the sorting process, and I haven't had any issues yet with things that I sell. Maybe I will, but I haven't yet. My only caveat with this would be for clothing, and I plan to do a video in the future of how I personally do, how I list clothing, my process for that, including sorting. Tip number 8 is to learn how to use eBay to do research. I think that this is super helpful for maybe categories that you're trying to understand or categories that you're trying to break into. Like clothing. When I started selling on eBay, I told myself that I am not going to let myself become a clothing reseller. It's just a very flooded market. A lot of people do it, and I'm not good at it. I didn't think that. But there's so much money to be made out there in clothing if you know what to look for. And so I'll do a video on how to research clothing, but you want to use the search tools within eBay to find out what sells in a particular brand or a particular category. So like just any random Wrangler shirt doesn't sell well. But if I go into the eBay search bar and I type in, I want to do a research on, are there any kinds of Wrangler shirts that sell well? Well, I will search for a Wrangler shirt. I will go into the sold listings, and then I'll start searching through the keywords of like what sells, what are some like really common keywords in titles, and then I'll search for those, and I'll compare sell-through rates of certain kinds of shirts. Or maybe it's a type of fabric, maybe it's canvas fabric or denim or suede. These are all things that you want to be aware of, and you want to actually do research ahead of time so that you can focus on specific things. For example, Columbia shirts. There's lots and lots of Columbia shirts. Columbia is a good brand, but it's such a flooded market that doesn't have a good sell-through rate. So I don't pick up Columbia shirts anymore, but I do know that Columbia PFG fishing shirts sell better than other types of Columbia shirts. And so if I find a Columbia fishing shirt that has PFG on normally like the chest pocket or in the back of the collar, and if it's under $4, I'm gonna pick it up every single time. But it's because of what I've learned through these tools of research of what exactly to look for. Tip number 9 is to get a designated card, debit card or credit card, for your eBay business, and to track your mileage. Both of these center around tax purposes. It's so helpful. I didn't start with this. I had one card that I'd use for personal and for business starting off, but so helpful having one place that I can go and see all of my purchases, all of my deductible items for eBay for the tax season, as well as mileage. Lots of driving happens for thrift stores and for pickups, and there's also creative ways that you can, combine trips to, increase the amount of tax deductible mileage that you have for your eBay reselling business, because you don't want to be paying taxes for this business. You have to. If you make enough money, you have to, but you want to reduce that amount as much as you can. There's no better way to start fresh with a nice clean card. Doesn't have to be a business card. It can be just a new credit card or a credit card that you don't use as much, or that you haven't used for a while, or you could open up a business checking account, but then you have to register a sole proprietorship with the state. At least I did here in Minnesota. But yeah, track your mileage. Use a card solely for business purposes. Finally, my last tip is that consistency wins. eBay reselling is going to be ups and downs. Sometimes you're going to feel like you make all of the right moves and you're not selling things. Other times you're going to feel like I've been really slacking, and you're going to have your best sales in a week, that week. But over the long, it's kind of like the law of large numbers. Over the long term, the more consistent you are, the more good choices you make, the more time and effort that you put into your reselling business, the more results that you're going to see. This is something where your success is directly related to the amount of good effort that you put into it. I compare it to poker, right? Like I like poker. Sometimes you make all of the right plays and the cards just don't fall your way for a given night. But there's a reason why the better poker players are always just seem to have a way to make their way to the final table at tournaments and events. It's because they make good plays. They do the right thing. Sometimes it doesn't work out. They bust early, and oftentimes it works out better than for the rest of the people. But stay consistent. Keep your head up. Try not to be affected by the lows, but also try not to get carried away with the highs. Just because you have a really great week doesn't mean that if you work twice as hard the next week or list twice as many items the next week, you're going to sell twice as many items. Doesn't work like that, but stay consistent and it'll work out in the end for you. These are my 10 tips for new eBay resellers in 2025. If you haven't already, drop a like down there, hit the subscribe button. I hope to bring you some helpful content. I might not be your go-to resource for eBay information, as I am in a lot of ways a novice myself, but hopefully I'm another voice that you can learn from, and also share if you had another tip that you think that I missed that was really crucial for you. Drop in the comment box below, and we'll see you again. Bye.